A movie sets the highest pre-sale record in Korean film history even before its release. After that, it causes a huge stir internationally and faces an open boycott from the entire nation of Japan. The film combines real historical events from the end of World War II, openly bringing the various crimes of the Japanese army to the big screen. However, due to the sheer scale of the storyline, the film has not yet been screened in many countries around the world. Today, then revisits this masterpiece, one of the top 5 Korean historical films. In 1810, rich undersea coal mines are discovered in the waters off Kyushu Island. For resource-poor Japan, this is nothing short of a windfall. Thus, it is immediately designated as a raw material source for industrial development. The mining location is Hashima Island, southwest of the Nagasaki coast. Because its shape resembles a battleship, it is also known as Battleship Island. Until 1890, Battleship Island is bought by Mitsubishi Corporation and becomes private property. In 1916, Mitsubishi Corporation builds Japan's first large concrete building on the island. After that, facilities such as schools, hospitals, cinemas, and bathhouses are successively built. With the rapid expansion of mining operations on this island with an area of only 63,000 square meters, the population density reaches a terrifying 83,600 people per square kilometer, which is more than 9 times that of Tokyo. Ranking first globally, it supplies a large amount of resources to Japan every day. This continues until World War II breaks out. Many young men enlist in the army, and the island experiences a severe labor shortage. To accelerate coal mining operations, Japan forcibly conscripts tens of thousands of laborers from China and Korea. The men are like moles, drilling into mine shafts 1 kilometer below the seabed every day, using the simplest tools to dig for coal. A slight mistake leads to a brutal beating from the overseers. Even if there is a gas leak or a mine collapse, they must not leave their posts. The women, on the other hand, become objects for the island's management personnel to vent their frustrations. They stay in the small rooms of the exploitation facility every day. Even if they are pregnant, they cannot rest. If they dare to walk out the door, they face scorn from Japanese women.
위험으로 있다 알아도 그러지 마. 중국에 정신대로가 났던 여자는 잘못 들어섰다가 배를 갈라서 알을 끄집어내고 며칠 있다가 계속 일본 군인 밖에 딱 하던데. What is even more despairing is that Korean presidential candidate Yoon Hak-chul is also imprisoned here. To let the outside world know the situation and come to their rescue, the laborers spontaneously organize people to send a letter to Nagasaki port. But because the underground passage is too narrow, they can only let the children shoulder this heavy responsibility. But that 15-kilometer straight distance, for children who do not even get enough to eat, has a difficulty no less than climbing to heaven. Not to mention, they also have to avoid the Japanese army pursuing them by boat.
여보세요. 今引き上げますか？なんでわざわざそんなプロするんだよ。報告書に接したがあったと書いてけ。3人も捕まえたんだが特別裁給もらえたろ。早くも誰だ。
In this way, the laborers' unwavering loyalty all turns into rewards for the management. Until the Japanese army falls behind on the front lines, things finally take a turn. In order to maintain the current mining output, the Japanese side begins to widely publicize in the Korean peninsula that anyone who comes to work on Hashima Island can not only be exempt from military service but also receive a huge salary. When he learns that working on the island for 1 year allows him to return and buy a mansion, Lee Kong-ok quickly takes out most of his savings and exchanges them for a letter of recommendation from a government official. However, after he boards the ship with his band members, he finds that the environment far worse than he imagined. The cabin contains not only women and children but also university students and thugs. To avoid any accidents, Lee Kong-ok collects all the orchestra's money and then hides it in the false bottom of an instrument case. The reality unfolds just as he expects. and a conflict immediately breaks out in the cabin.
저 최칠성이 아니야? 동록깡패 최칠성이? 하여간 누가 조선 종자들 아니랄까봐 그새를 못 참고 첫 싸우고 잠맞았다.
Just then, Japanese soldiers, hearing the commotion, rush in. They then spray indiscriminately with high-pressure water cannons. After the cabin returns to calm, the Japanese officer warns everyone. He states that if anyone dares to cause trouble again, the high-pressure water cannon will turn into rifle bullets. Several hours later, everyone finally exits the foul-smelling cabin. Lee Kong-ok does not bother to admire the prosperity of Shimonoseki Port. Instead, he rushes to the officer in charge to get a head start and secure a good job. He also specially prepares a gift. However, the officer appears full of impatience. Kong-ok, who does not notice this, still exaggerates about the letter of recommendation. But after he takes it out, he is told that there are many Mr. Shimuras here. The officer then has them sent onto a train. He gives them no chance to ask any questions. When he sees the ground covered with identical recommendation letters, Lee Kong-ok finally realizes he has been deceived. But he understands all of this too late. Soon, everyone from the boat is stuffed into a train. Then they board a transport ship and leave the land, until an island resembling a warship appears before them, and everyone finally feels relieved. But just then, a group of Japanese soldiers rushes onto the ship and snatches the women. They even do not spare young Lee So-hee. The men try to stop them, but as a result, they are severely brutalized. Helpless, Lee Kong-ok can only helplessly watch his daughter being taken away. After the women's figures completely disappear, they are also escorted to the island. When they discover they must hand over everything they brought, a man wants to keep his engagement ring. Unexpectedly, an overseer nearby immediately becomes violent. Listening to the two people's mournful wails, Lee Kong-ok is somewhat incredulous. When he discovers one of the overseers is Korean, he quickly rushes forward to explain. He also takes out his skill certificate to prove the authenticity of his identity. Lee Kong-ok immediately brings his troop members and starts to perform. Just as everyone performs with great effort, Lee So-hee and the women are taken to the hospital. The naive group believes it is a pre-work physical. Only Mallion's face is filled with despair.
ここ羽島の遊郭は去年、ただの一度も性病がなかったことで表彰されたところだ。君たちもこの栄誉に泥を塗らないよう、いつも清潔にするように。次。
Meanwhile, Lee Kong-ok sees that the Japanese greatly enjoy his performance. So he secretly slips his beloved watch to the foreman. He tries to use this method to keep his daughter by his side. But before he finishes speaking, the Japanese officer interrupts him. When he learns the officer wants to hear Sakura, Sakura, Lee Kong-ok can only reluctantly turn around and continue playing. As the familiar melody plays, the violence in the Japanese soldiers' hearts is instantly suppressed. Then, they all begin to sing. The brief piece makes everyone forget their previous suffering. Just then, Shimazaki, the mine director, walks out. Upon hearing this, Lee Kong-ok immediately steps forward to ingratiate himself. But before he finishes speaking, he is kicked down. Seeing the foreman's terrified expression, he finds it somewhat difficult to understand. After all, the director is not only kind-faced. Shimazaki even wholeheartedly considers the workers. It is not until the official handover officially begins that Lee Kong-ok sees Shimazaki's true colors. He sees everyone treated just like livestock, standing in the square and disinfecting in the simplest way. Then, they are taken to the living area. But before they even enter the gate, they receive a detailed statement. The statement is densely filled with various fees, almost covering all living necessities. Even pre-job training, accident insurance, translators for daily communication, and equipment required for work are all listed on the statement. As for these fees, they are deducted from their monthly salaries. If it is not enough, it continues to be postponed. What is even more frustrating is that the company also forces them to buy national bonds. Although it is ostensibly for retirement preparation, this money also requires them to pay OU of their own pockets. This means that they have not yet earned money here, but they already owe a large foreign debt. What Lee Kong-ok expects even less is that their living conditions are even worse than pigs and dogs. The dormitory is impossible to step into. The beds are soaked with seawater. Rats scurry on the dining table. The food is inedible, and cockroaches crawl everywhere. Obviously, the Japanese do not care about their lives. Even if he guesses the truth, Lee Kong-ok has no way to change the current situation. Moreover, the most important thing right now is to find his daughter first. But Shimazaki would never let them be idle, sending the laborers into the mine that very day. They finally escaped the Japanese surveillance. But who would have thought? When the Tej is away, the monkey becomes king. Seeing a college student brutally beaten by a fellow Korean foreman, Choi Chil-sung cannot stand it. He proposes a one-on-one fight with Song Jong-ji-yu, stating that whoever wins will manage the Koreans. Hearing there is entertainment, the Japanese officer readily agrees. Seeing the situation, Song Jong-ji-yu launches the first attack. But as an ordinary man, he is no match for the gang leader. In a few blows, he is beaten and loses the ability to resist. Thus, Choi Chil-sung becomes the foreman for the Koreans. Meanwhile, Lee So-hee is taken to a private room. Watching the women being groped in men's arms, the young girl instantly understands everything. Seeing Lee So-hee is so scared she is about to cry out. Malion quickly shakes her head to signal because she knows very well that this would only further provoke the Japanese men's bestial nature. Just then, Shimazaki orders someone to play a record. After hearing the familiar melody, Lee So-hee immediately grabs the packaging and then rushes onto the stage, ignoring the attempts to stop her.
언니, 이 노래 내가 불렀다고 얘기해주세요. 내가 불렀다고 얘기해주세요. 언니, 얘기해주세요. 今流れてる歌、あの子が歌ったそうです。
오.
언니, 나 춤추고 노래하고 악기도 다루고 뭐든지 다 할 수 있어요. 나 밥, 청소, 빨래 뭐든지 다 할 수 있어요, 언니. 自分は踊りも歌も楽器もできるし、数も上手だそうです。
何をやってた子だ?
너 뭐더더 나냐고 물어. 경성에서 악단 활동을 했었어요. 야마무라 가쿠단. 케이조노 야마무라 가쿠단대 같이 도시다そうです. 우리 아빠하고 삼촌들하고 다 같이 여기 왔어요. 텐노이카 반자이! 반자이! 반자이!
텐노헤이카
반자이! 반자이! 반자이!
Afterward, the band members are brought before Shimazaki. Looking at his daughter's attire, Lee Kong-ok feels a mix of emotions. But then he makes a funny face. After all, in this place like a demon's den, simply being alive is a stroke of luck amidst misfortune. Not to mention they return to their old profession. They not only avoid having to risk their lives mining coal like everyone else, but also get to eat their fill occasionally, thanks to the high-end red wine he procures and his smooth, opportunistic ways. Lee Kong-ok's relationship with the Japanese becomes increasingly close. Meanwhile, the Korean Liberation Army receives intelligence support from the American side. When they learn that Yoon Hak-chul is imprisoned on Hashima Island, the superiors decide to send their strongest agent to rescue him. Soon, Park Moo-young infiltrates Hashima Island and successfully meets Yoon Hak-chul. But before he can reveal his identity, an accident occurs in the mine shaft. The unsuspecting university student is instantly killed, and the mine cart derails, causing widespread damage to the facilities. As gas comes into contact with broken electrical wires, an explosion instantly occurs in the mine shaft. The laborers, with nowhere to hide, suffer heavy casualties. Hearing the continuous screams, Yoon Hak-chul quickly organizes a rescue team. But unexpectedly, a second collapse occurs in the mine shaft. The helpless crowd can only watch as their companions are buried by falling rocks. Upon receiving the news, Shimazaki becomes furious. To ensure the excavation of other mine shafts, he directly orders his men to blow up mine shaft number 2 from the middle. He completely disregards the lives of the laborers below. After completely blowing up the mine shaft, he impatiently rushes towards the banquet hall. But just then, a subordinate brings him bad news. When he hears that Yoon Hak-chul is also trapped in the mine shaft, Shimazaki quickly turns around and rushes back to his room. He orders everyone to go down into the mine and rescue Yoon Hak Chul at all costs. Because he knows very well that if Yoon Hak Chul dies in the mine shaft, the remaining Korean laborers will become uncontrollable. However, because the collapsed section is too long, it is impossible to dig through with manpower alone. In desperation, Song Jong-ji-yu decides to detonate the gas to blast open the connection. The people on the other side are also not idle. When they discover someone has secretly hidden a stick of dynamite, Park Moo-young immediately places it where the gas is leaking, and the remaining people are responsible for pulling him out during the detonation. With the combined efforts of both sides, the laborers finally break through the mine shaft. Shimazaki dares not show any slack and immediately calls his superior to report the situation. He prepares to take the severely injured laborers. He sends them to a big hospital in Nagasaki, then cremates them with the dead. This not only calms the workers' emotions but also saves a lot of money. However, after he finishes explaining the plan, his superiors reject it. When he learns the company is recalling funds and the Americans have been dropping surrender leaflets recently, Shimazaki instantly guesses the frontline situation. To leave himself a way out, he decides to give Lee So-hee to Chiba, who has special fetishes, and promises him he will handle the matter. Soon Yoon Hak Chul appears before the workers. He righteously tells everyone that if they do not disclose the casualties from today's accident and provide compensation and measures to prevent recurrence, they will refuse a personal meeting with director Shimazaki. Looking at the serious Yoon Hak Chul, the workers shout in response and then prepare to go back and wait for compensation. But just then, Song Jong-ji-yu snatches the foreman's armband. Choi Chil-sung wants an explanation, but the officer does not give him a chance to speak. Afterward, the dejected Choi Chil-sung tries to numb himself with alcohol. But just then, screams come from upstairs. He discovers the person being beaten is Malion. He directly knocks the man unconscious with a wine bottle. Then he takes Malion upstairs. He does not care at all about the punishment for attacking a Japanese man. After they return to the room, Malion thinks Choi Chil-sung has other intentions, so she voluntarily takes off her clothes.
그냥 앉으라고. 연애하러 온 거 아니니까.
The reason Malion is so resistant towards men is because she was previously taken to an exploitation facility in the 3 northeastern provinces. The Japanese soldiers there are far more terrifying than beasts. She tried to end the nightmare by committing suicide. However, she did not succeed. Instead, she was punished by the Japanese soldiers. It was not until the Japanese in the 3 northeastern provinces were annihilated that she escaped from the hellhole. She finally returns to her hometown. Unexpectedly, she only stays for a few days before the villagers sell her here. Since then, she no longer trusts her so-called compatriots. Listening to Malion's tragic experience, Choi Chil-sung is somewhat surprised. His heart, silent for many years, even feels a ripple. At the same time, Park Moo-young and Yoon Hak Chul reveal their identities, and they voluntarily explain their escape plan. When they hear that only he comes to rescue them, Yoon Hak Chul's confidant finds it somewhat difficult to accept. They worry that this time will be like before. He is discovered by the Japanese before he even swims to Nagasaki port. Before he finishes speaking, Yoon Hak Chul agrees to leave. Meanwhile, Lee Kong-ok is called to Shimazaki's residence. Looking at his daughter's toe pierced by a wooden splinter, he feels very heartbroken.
조심 좀 아직 하시네. 냄새.
Shimazaki directly tells Lee Kong-ok that he wants to send Lee So-hee to Japan. Although Shimazaki says it is to be an adopted daughter for a company executive, Lee Kong-ok understands the true meaning. Listening to Shimazaki's threatening words, he knows he has no choice. As he is about to leave, Lee Kong-ok gives his daughter the dessert he took from the table. Looking at her sweet smiling face, he endures his discomfort and dances with his daughter. At this moment, the exceptionally bright lights in the darkness seem to mock the absurdity of war. Just as Lee Kong-ok is in despair, Park Moo-young and a few others show up at his door. One of them claims to be the leader of the Korean Independence Army. He hopes Lee Kong-ok can help him get the key to the post office. He also actively offers a large sum of money as reward. Looking at the man's anxious appearance, Lee Kong-ok immediately senses something is wrong, so he asks about their true purpose.
전신기를 써야 하오.
전신기? 쓸 줄 알아?
열쇠만 구해주시오.
신참 새끼는 오자마자 전신기 쓴다고. 독립군 노릇하는 조선인 개장놈을 와이로까지 써서 나서. 이거 뭐 하자는 거야?
Seeing this, Park Moo-young no longer hides it, stating directly that he needs to use the telegraph machine to contact Okinawa and then take Yoon Hak-chul away from here. After hearing this, Lee Kong-ok immediately throws the money to the man and then agrees to help steal the key. But on the condition that he takes both the father and daughter with him. After weighing the pros and cons, Park Moo-young agrees to the request. And Lee Kong-ok indeed does not disappoint everyone, with his extensive connections and extraordinary courage. He completes the task in less than 2 days. And he also additionally obtains the keys to the main gate in Shimazaki's office. That night, Park Moo-young, under the cover of the laborers, infiltrates the office building and successfully makes contact with the people on Okinawa. But to ensure the secrecy of the operation, he does not report the father and daughter's names for inclusion. Just then, a safe nearby catches Park Moo-young's attention. He ignores his colleague's reply and quickly walks forward to check. He sees the words, Peninsula Freemasonry, clearly written on it. Early the next morning, an urgent air raid siren sounds on the island. As everyone wonders, several planes slowly fly past. When he hears Shimazaki tell everyone to turn off the lights and stay inside, Park Moo-young determines that the American side is about to launch an attack. To avoid an accident, he quickly wakes Yoon Hak-chul, planning to leave Battleship Island that night. Unexpectedly, as he steps out of the room, he comes face to face with a Japanese soldier. Park Moo-young disregards exposing his whereabouts and directly twists the soldier's neck, throwing him into the restroom. Lee Kong-ok happens to witness this scene. Seeing the motionless Japanese soldier, Lee Kong-ok dares not show any slack. He quickly goes to Shimazaki's home to call his daughter. However, when he finds the two again, Park Moo-young points his gun at Yoon Hak-chul.
강욱이, 지금부터 내가 하는 말 잘 듣게. 이제는 우리 조선과는 아무 상관도 없는 미군 첩철세. 지금 박무익이를 고발하면 전역 딸 이성을 나갈 수가 있어.
소장한테 가는 순간 다 죽어.
애초에 네놈이 여기 온 진짜 목적이 뭐야?
소희야, 아버지가 소리치면 소장한테 달려가서 아버지가 시키는 대로 다 일러. 이자와 시마자키는 한패야. 이런 씨발 것들이 진짜. 그래서 배는 언제 오는데?
Upon seeing Lee So-hee kidnapped by Yoon Hak-chul's henchmen, Park Moo-young immediately reveals his discovery. He reveals that the previous night he finds a ledger in the safe. It records the detailed wage statements of the laborers for the past few months. But this money does not reach the laborers. Instead, it is all deposited into Yoon Hak-chul's account, and then half of it is transferred to Shimazaki. Furthermore, it also has Yoon Hak-chul's signature and handprint on it. Not only that, even the deceased workers' compensation funds all go into their pockets. This indicates that the laborer who delivered the letter previously dies entirely due to the duo's scheme. Upon seeing the man stubbornly refuse to believe that Yoon Hak-chul is a traitor, Park Mod-young directly throws the ledger onto the ground. But at this moment, a deafening engine roar suddenly comes from above. Immediately after, a missile lands in the corner. The unprepared Park Moo-young is instantly knocked down. Seeing this, the man immediately pounces to snatch the weapon, while Lee Kong-ok takes the opportunity to pick up the ledger and escapes with his daughter. But the situation outside is even more severe. Countless shells rain down, blooming like evil flowers on the ground. At once, catastrophic devastation and wailing fill the air. The survivors want to hide in the air raid shelter. But unexpectedly, Japanese soldiers guard the entrance, preventing foreign laborers from entering. Anyone who dares to cross the line is immediately eliminated on the spot, leaving no room for negotiation. Thus, the The laborers with nowhere to hide can only remain outside and await death. Meanwhile, Yoon Hak-chul, who finds a gun, pulls the trigger on Park Moo-young. To prevent the news from leaking, he also eliminated the confidant who was present earlier. But he never expects this action actually reveals his identity. After Yoon Hak-chul leaves, Lee Kong-ok quickly takes his daughter to find a hiding place. Unexpectedly, after only a few steps, he discovers Park Moo-young in the sewer. The enraged man wants to demand an explanation, but Park Moo-young is too weak to respond. Seeing the bleeding wound on his arm, Lee Kong-ok immediately carries him to a safe place. Meanwhile, Yoon Hak-chul is still inquiring about his whereabouts. Fortunately, someone says they saw a body, and the father and daughter thus temporarily escape danger. After the cleanup work finishes, Yamada directly orders the laborers disposed of the remains. The bodies of the Japanese wait to be sent back to their homeland. They see their compatriots burned like trash. The laborers can no longer suppress their anger. As the situation escalates, Yamada hurriedly calls his company superior. After he explains the situation, he is told that the US drops a new type of bomb on Hiroshima, causing hundreds of thousands of casualties. In addition, Germany already announces its surrender, and defeat is a foregone conclusion. To avoid being labeled a war criminal enterprise, Chiba orders Yamada to eliminate all unstable elements on the island. When he hears that he can be promoted to director if he handles it properly, Yamada first fatally silences the seriously injured Shimazaki. Then he sends Song Jong-ji-yu to kill a Japanese female student and frames Choi Chil-sung for the crime. Because he clearly understands that if he removes this troublemaker, the remaining laborers are nothing to fear. After Song Jong-ji-yu takes Choi Chil-sung away, Yamada immediately states his position to Yoon Hak-chul. He explains that communication has returned to normal and the transport ship is about to be repaired. He adds that if they want to leave together, they must eliminate all the laborers on the island. When he hears that Yoon Hak-chul agrees with Yamada, Park Moo-young no longer cares about finding food, hurriedly takes Lee So-hee back to their hiding place, and begs Lee Kong-ok to help him stop this disaster. Because he clearly understands Yoon Hak-chul's prestige here. With just this much evidence in hand, it is impossible to bring him down. Lee Kong-ok then goes to Yoon Hak-chul's room to search for evidence. He eventually finds all the ledgers hidden in a floor compartment. At the same time, Yoon Hak-chul gathers the laborers together. He righteously tells everyone that he has already negotiated with director Yamada. From now on, the company not only implements a system of equal pay for equal work with the Japanese, but also adds extra rest time and family visit leave. Watching the cheering crowd, Yoon Hak-chul takes the opportunity to announce that the company will hold a resumption of work ceremony. He also emphasizes that all Koreans must go down into the mine together. Just then, Park Moo-young suddenly walks out from the crowd. He then reveals all the truth publicly. Yoon Hak-chul tries to confuse right and wrong, but before he finishes speaking, Lee Kong-ok steps forward with the ledgers. However, what the two of them never expect is that even with clear written evidence, the crowd still refuses to believe that Yoon Hak-chul is a traitor. Seeing Park Moo-young become the target of public criticism, at a critical moment, a man wearing glasses stands up. He is another one of Yoon Hak-chul's confidants. He personally witnesses the entire process at the time. He also obtains the number plate torn off by his companion. Faced with such irrefutable evidence, the crowd's conviction finally wavers. Yoon Hak-chul sees this and tries to escape, but it is too late. As Park Moo-young's hand rises and falls with the knife, this parasite who has harmed people for so long finally receives his deserved punishment. But next, there is an even bigger problem that Park Moo-young needs to solve. That is to lead all his compatriots out of this hellhole. He plans to use the advantage of numbers to seize the Japanese transport ship under the cover of night. Unexpectedly, as soon as he finishes speaking, the crowd immediately splits into two factions. One side is willing to fight to the death with him, while the other side is afraid of death and wants to negotiate with the Japanese. Looking at his wavering compatriots, Park Moo-young finally realizes that Korea has become like this not because of the existence of people like Yoon Hak-chul, but rather due to their cowardly, weak, and infighting nature.
아빠, 우리 못 가?
에이, 쌍 속에 천불 났어 진짜. 이씨. 누가 조선 종자들 아니랄까봐. 상황이 여기까지 왔으면 살 생각들을 해야 될 거 아니야. 허구한 날 저 발표 살다 보니까 뭐 알아서 기는 게 습관 됐어?
As soon as these words are spoken, most people change their minds. Only a few still insist on staying to negotiate. Seeing this, Park Moo-young stops wasting words and immediately directs everyone to begin preparations. The demolition team is responsible for modifying makeshift grenades. The weapons team is responsible for making Molotov cocktails. The injured team is responsible for dismantling tatami mats to make shields. The women are responsible for collecting 6-foot ropes and weaving long ropes. After controlling those who want to negotiate, Park Moo-young takes a few people to deal with the guards first. The reality is just as he expects. The Japanese soldiers on the island are all ordinary people with simple training. Soon, they successfully take over the transport ship. Park Moo-young does not bother to rest and immediately tells a few people to stay and familiarize themselves with the operation. He then returns alone to deliver the message. At the same time, Choi Chil-sung's subordinates rush into the interrogation room. After dealing with Song Jong-gu's men, they directly pry open the weapons cabinet in the labor office. But before they can check, the door is pushed open from outside. When he discovers the person who arrives is Malion, Choi Chil-sung's heart is instantly filled. Malion wants the few of them to leave with the main group. However, Choi Chil-sung rejects her request. Because he knows very well that over 400 people boarding the ship together makes it impossible to avoid detection. Not to mention, there are also a large number of wounded among them. And the fact is just as he thinks. Park Moo-young just brings his people to the conveyor belt when suddenly appearing guards force them to stop. Fortunately, Lee Kong-ok and several women risk themselves, which prevents them from failing at the last minute. After dealing with the guards, everyone quickly evacuates according to the plan. But when she sees the height of the pipe, the girl refuses to go forward. In an emergency, the old man with a crutch decides to lead the way. However, as soon as he boards the boat, a raging fire ignites in the living area. Before Park Moo-young can react, a flare shoots into the sky. Then, an ear-piercing alarm sounds. The originally quiet and orderly crowd instantly becomes chaotic, desperately climbing on the conveyor belt. To let more compatriots live, Choi Chil-sung and his subordinates block the Japanese soldiers. However, 2 fists can never defeat 4 hands, so they can only fight and retreat. Seeing that the Japanese soldiers are about to rush over, the demolition team and the weapons team also throw bombs in their hands to resist. Unexpectedly, at this moment, the conveyor belt breaks into 2 under the heavy load. Just as everyone falls into despair, Lee Kong-ok rushes out decisively. He tries to lift the conveyor belt. However, no one responds at all. Listening to her father's desperate shouts, Lee So-hee suppresses her fear and runs over. Her small body is like a ray of light piercing the darkness, instantly allowing hope to gain the upper hand. As more and more people join, the heavy conveyor belt finally reacts. Seeing the laborers fall in droves, Yamada excitedly shouts loudly, but then Choi Chil-sung's slap comes flying. Seeing that the Japanese firepower is attracted by a few people, Park Moo-young quick-L organizes people to counterattack. Under their desperate efforts, the conveyor belt is finally lifted. But after seeing the eaves on the wall, Lee Kong-ok quickly leads people to get the rising sun flag. Then he cuts it into 2 sections to serve as ropes. After the 2 ropes are tied, Lee Kong-ok immediately orders everyone to pull backward. Meanwhile, Park Moo-young leads his people in a final charge. Relying on their reckless fighting style, they make up for the difference in physical fitness. But they still cannot effectively eliminate the Japanese. Choi Chil-sung and a few others want to step forward to help. But unexpectedly, they are ambushed by Song Jong-gi. Watching his beloved woman and brothers fall one after another, Choi Chil-sung frantically pulls the trigger. However, it causes no damage. At this critical moment, Malion fights to stay conscious and pulls the trigger. He sees Song Jong-gu's abdomen is hit. Choi Chil-sung immediately stands up and pounces. After knocking Song Jong-gi to the ground, he directly breaks him in half. Looking at the trembling traitor, he does not attack again. After all, Living in a chaotic world, everyone is fighting for their lives. But just as he takes 2 steps, the traitor pulls the trigger on him. Choi Chil-sung endures the pain and walks to Malion's side. With 2 gunshots, the two who just found love fall forever on this dark land. The traitors hurriedly go to Yamada to claim credit, but what they get in return is merciless bullets. Seeing that the Japanese have already rushed forward, Lee Kong-ok jumps off the conveyor belt, intending to help. Unexpectedly, just as he picks up the gun, it accidentally misfires. Then he is shot in the abdomen. Park Moo-young wants to stop Yamada, but he is instead shot in the thigh. Just as Lee So-hee is about to be harmed, Park Moo-young throws a stone with all his might. Lee Kong-ok, meanwhile, takes the opportunity to pull the trigger. However, he does not hit a vital spot. Seeing that Yamada is about to stab her father with a knife, Lee So-hee picks up a Molotov cocktail from the ground and throws it with all her might. Yamada's screams instantly echo across the entire battlefield. Hearing the commotion, the Japanese soldiers all look over. Seeing this, Park Moo-young immediately strikes down with a knife. As Yamada's body falls, this battle finally concludes with the laborers' victory. After all the remaining laborers come out, the transport ship slowly sails towards home. However, Lee Kong-ok can no longer accompany his daughter as she grows up. Just as everyone is in grief, a loud bang suddenly comes from the direction of Nagasaki, accompanied by a huge mushroom cloud rising. All the chaos in the world finally completely returns to peace. Regarding this history, some people choose to forget and ignore it. However, director Ryu Sung-won chooses to use a movie to expose this tearful history of the laborers to the light, constantly reminding everyone to remember history and cherish peace.